Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Nick Peverly.
Thank you for that introduction, my good friend. A weird Mexican guy whose name keeps changing. Manny Martinez, everybody. Let's keep it going, huh? So, my girlfriend recently moved out. She packed... Sorry. As I was saying before God stuck his finger up my ass, my girlfriend moved out recently. Just picked up in the middle of the night. That or we were robbed and they only took her shit. It was probably time, though. Our love life, not so great. You know it's not good when your girlfriend refers to having sex with you as taking one for the team. Who's that? Who laughed? What's your name?
Robin.
Robin. Don't. Okay? I would rather a woman fake an orgasm than fake a laugh. Right?
Thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me. That's my crotch.
That's your body?
Yeah, that's me.
I've had this poster up here, I think, 3 or 4 times now, including this. I never knew that that was actually...
Pretty exciting.
What was it like to know that you were going to be on the poster of the show, but it wasn't going to be your face? It was going to be your crotch?
A true honor, yeah, yeah.
Did they tell you that?
Prepped a lot with this move at home. No, I had no idea that that would be... I just like got to LA and saw that and was like, all right, great, cool.
Did you do a photo shoot and they're like, this is going to be the poster for the show, and you were like, oh, amazing, and then all of a sudden it came out and it was just your crotch?
They had a lot of concepts, and I was like mildly difficult about which ones I didn't want to do, and but that was definitely, obviously, one I was into. But I assumed you would see, you know, me in it. Maybe the photo would be from here, you know, or here.
You'd be like,
not.
sort of peeking up, like,
Yeah, maybe I'm dead. Maybe I've had a successful set. Yeah, but it's a lovely campaign.
Absolutely.
Outside of me talking about my crotch, it's a lovely
absolutely.
concept.
I love the show.
Thank you.
Episode 9 is on this Sunday on Showtime, right?
Yes,
and then
it
the
is.
season finale, the final week. Your character has a pretty incredible arc this season. We've seen him sort of clean up his act.
Yeah.
You're playing a struggling addict who's also a stand-up comedian. What kind of research did you do for both of those?
Well, I was a big fan of stand-up as a child. As a kid, I thought I wanted to be a stand-up, and then ended up going to drama school and pursuing acting more than that. More than, I mean, at all. I never pursued it, but had, you know, a love for stand-up, and then just tried to pick apart like what the performance element is, you know, like how you control an audience, how you build something, how you, like, it's a magic trick, right? To me it is, at least, and the joy is partially in like the reveal and how you hide the trick and how you set someone up and how you know, like, that there's a seeming element of, oh, someone's just up there telling a story, but they've built it out for months or years to perfect how everything functions so the audience is drawn to the laugh, you know?
Part of that building it up, though, I think is similar to dramatic acting as well, which is you're practicing it and you're practicing it in the way that you rehearse it, and you rehearse it so that when you get up there, it feels natural, that you're going through these motions and the reveal, but at the same time, like you said, it feels very natural, like someone's just up there talking.
Yeah, yes. In this case, yeah, I mean, in this case, you have a mix of like the performative element of being a stand-up in which you are on display, whereas in a, you know, a scene, you are trying to sort of, the fake is that it's just you and I in a room, that there isn't like a sound guy and a camera operator and a DP and all this stuff. So I guess I looked into or tested out like how to do that. We had a great young stand-up who was on the show like as a coach essentially to go through the material, just to give like pointers here and there, simple stuff. Like in that clip, are we allowed to swear? Can I swear on this thing?
Yeah,
okay, great. So, not that I'm like a
curse it up
problem cursor or whatever, but Nick like fucks up the mic stand and the thing, and that's like a full amateur move. When you see guys like tug at the cable, like just all the guys in the show are stand-ups were like, nobody does that. You look like an idiot. Like that's the beginning when you see a guy who doesn't know how to hold a microphone, doesn't know what to do with the stand. Like that's part of figuring it out. So to come onto the show as a guy who's supposed to like kind of be on the up, you have to get that stuff ironed out. You can't show up and start doing that and basically reveal that you're an actor bullshitting through pretending to be a stand-up. But in that scene in particular, Nick is newly sober, or at least trying to kick heroin, and blows it on stage, like does not have the goods if he's not a little messed up on stage. And so that sort of amateurish, like just doesn't know where he is in the world, comes through. And all of that is built out of understanding what a good stand-up would be doing and how to subvert that to tell a different story that's true to that world, instead of just going up and bumbling around as if that will sell it well enough. And as far as the addiction stuff, the simple answer would be like, oh, I experimented with a lot of drugs, which was not untrue in my...
At one time, but
years ago. Not currently. I wasn't like, I'm going to get into smack just for this. But you...
Tell that to the producers and the insurance company behind the shows.
Yeah. Jake, we're not doing a 5th season. Yeah, good, fine.
So kick smack now.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other heroin rolls, or this was it? But really, that to me, like the heroin is like this. The drug addiction is this impediment to. It's like a necessity and an impediment in Nick's life, in which he feels like he, as an actor. I think I want to find why he needs this and what he's missing in the world and what he wants most, which is probably like love and self-acceptance and compassion. And that sadly for him, heroin is the only path that he's found to that.
Well,
and at the same time is killing him.
And at the same time, it retains his detachment from the world as well.
Right. It doesn't require anything of him to participate. That he can remain removed. So to me, looking at Nick's story through that is more telling than, for me, like to work on this material, it gives me more of the answers I'm looking for than just like, this is a guy who does drugs. That's kind of no use. That's for an audience to view, but like as to what drives that person and what they want, and then the disappointment that comes out of not having that in your life, that is more the story, and then we see what he does to solve it, which is make a terrible choice and shoot heroin instead of going to therapy.
There's also the, where he is in his addiction is a very specific place as well. It's not, normally when you see movies about addiction, specifically heroin addiction, or you see documentaries, it's people who are really at the bottom of what's going on with them. And Nick is, for all intents and purposes, a functioning addict for the most part in the show. And just as he's sort of losing that functionability is when he kicks. And it seems that the backstory is that prior to him showing up in LA, at the start of the show, he was maybe at a bottom. Is that the case?
Yeah, the sort of unspoken, or maybe not directly, spoken story behind Nick is that he came up with a lot of these guys in the LA scene, and then was to some extent blackballed from clubs for being too much of a mess. That like you just didn't know if you were going to get this kid who came on stage and was like on fire, or was strung out, or didn't show up at all, and they just could not bother to book him anymore. So he goes on the circuit and starts doing the Playboy clubs, which at the time were like not as seedy as they became and started out as sort of a private club entertainment destination. And through that winds up getting the Tonight Show. But again, like through his own choices and through other people's choices, winds up out on the road and rather than telling these clubs years ago, oh, I'll give this up and get on the straight and narrow, he's like, fuck off, and chooses his lifestyle over theirs and goes on the road. So he comes back with this same baggage, you know, telling everyone that he's cleaned up his act and obviously is, you know, on the road to ruin through addiction.
Now, I mean, the main question that I imagine every actor from this show gets that I feel like I have to ask, do my due diligence.
Please.
Did you do any stand-up in preparation for the show? Did you get some material from some of the writers and go out and give it a shot? And how did that go?
I had done stand-up one other time in Austin, Texas, when I was making a little movie down there. And
movie?
Originally it was called Intramural, which is
it
is now Balls Out. Great choice by the releasing folks to change it to Balls Out. The cover of which was a woman's butt cheeks holding a football, as if we were part of the no disrespect, but Van Wilder, you know, universe. And there's specifically no butts other than my own shown, and no balls, including my own. No nuts. Like, it just was like, what? The people who are going to rent that movie based on Balls Out are going to be disappointed, and the people who would have liked Intramural will never see it.
I want to meet the distribution guy who came up with that whole idea. I want to know what his look is, and you know, is he smoking the Balls Out? You know,
he's a guy who definitely still smokes indoors.
Got a mustache.
Yeah. Like, yeah, meet Tommy, our distribution exec. Look, I got this whole idea, you guys. It's called Balled Out. Let's get the reshoots going.
Did you have to do reshoots for it after they
No. No, the guys who made the movie were like, for real Balls Out? Like, do we not have a leg to stand on? Can we not fight this? And then for a while, it was released on VOD as Intramural and released in Walmart as Balls Out. I mean, it was just like... It was a bummer because we had the greatest time making this movie. It was a fun little weird movie. It went to Tribeca. Like, it was crazy. This little movie that we thought was just, you know, a bunch of idiots in Texas like goofing off and making this fun film got a little bit of attention. And then, you know, I guess I'll never have a movie at Orion. Sorry, everybody. But, like, they botched it. You know what I mean? They kind of blew it. Anyway, I did a little bit of stand-up there. And it was a very supportive audience of basically the cast and crew at like these improv shows we would do once a week. And then for this, it was offered that we could go to open mics, but the material that most of us were drawing from was the show material, and it's written to be era appropriate. And not that it's specific, you're not doing like Nixon jokes, but like... Still, the cadence of it is different. The vibe of it is different. The sort of what was edgy in 1973, 74 was very different, obviously, than what's cool and current and edgy and funny now.
And a lot of the material is sort of unspokenly sexist as well, that the men perform on the show, which is a smart take on the show. Male comedy or comedy performed by men in the early to mid to late 70s to last 3 decades is like usually...
Currently, yes.
But especially then, it's fairly sexist. They thought they were being edgy by talking about sex, but most of it is like, my girlfriend doesn't want to have sex with me. Like, it's all fairly sexist. So if you went on stage and performed that at an open mic,
yeah, there's also
not going to go well.
Like, there's a scene. I guess I'm just talking about scenes on the show, but there's a scene where Cassie has just been basically like assaulted by this guy after doing like a commercial gig, for an airline, and she and I are having this discussion, and she's like, "What's it like to be a guy on stage? You don't have to pretend to be different than you are." And Nick says that sounds like every stand-up that I know, which is consciously tone deaf. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's a guy who thinks he's relating to a woman and saying like, hey, you're no different, without realizing it absolutely is different. you know, like he, even for a guy who seems cool and progressive in 1973, doesn't really know how to have that discussion that it is inherently different for a woman on stage still.
It sounds exactly like your character in Girls. Consciously tone deaf.
yes, willingly tone deaf. Yeah. I think Fran might have been, he's even worse. Like, Nick doesn't know that he's being tone deaf. Fran thought he was like the most progressive person in the room and was like, you know what's most progressive? Doing away with affirmative action. It's run its course. And you're like, oh, that's not even close. Oh, wow. Yeah.
When you got Fran...
Glad we could get to affirmative action in this panel.
Hey, let's talk about it. You know, the Justice Department is reorganizing. Let's talk about it.
I just listened to the Daily, like the New York Times thing, did a whole thing this morning on it about the lawsuit that is like... You don't want to talk about that.
No, go for it.
During the Obama administration, they brought this lawsuit of a white woman who was, I believe, suing the University of Texas for not getting in and saying that because of her race, she had been discriminated against, essentially, through affirmative action. And so they brought the case and it was dismissed. And the same person who brought that case or sort of shepherded it along has now found other plaintiffs, which he's done before, which is either incredibly intelligent or a bit divisive, who he feels the court system will see differently. And so he's now taken an Asian American individual who feels the same way and didn't get into Harvard or Yale, and looking at the percentiles and all these things, is then once again filing that lawsuit. And this administration seems to have a more vested interest in doing away with that for whatever their viewpoints are, and so have taken up the cause to see this through. And it's this weird, like, I don't know. I mean, it's a little insane to me.
They are at the very least horrible at PR with this administration, and at the very worst, just full-on white supremacists.
Yeah, like there's a Showtime's gonna love that this is the route I took. You know what I mean? Like 17 minutes in, Jake went off the rails on a fucking neoliberal rant, but let it be said. No, you're right. It's either like a complete inability to present their point of view in a way that seems at all rational, or a completely irrational agenda in which like you're living in your own reality as to how things are and should be, which in a way, here we go. You just like the media landscape in a lot of ways. There's still shows on that are like, are white guys not going to get a chance? Yeah. You're like, no, they've had a chance forever. Like, it's been only chances, so...
You still have a chance.
You've still got a good shot. You still got according to two white guys in their 30s...
Look who's sitting here.
You've got a good shot, guys, okay? Keep trying.
This wasn't that hard for us.
No, I was born with a microphone in my hand, given this chair at birth. But it just is like... that to me, with the number of like issues in the world, to choose to take on the amount of time and money to do away with affirmative action is like, that's your priority? That minorities are getting too much of a shake in this world is like, I don't know if I was running the show if that's what I'd go for, but I guess the base gets very excited by it.
That's really all that it's about. I feel like I mean, I could go on about this forever, but I feel like I should move you off for the.
Let's switch this screen, baby.
Yeah. Just affirmative action and Jeff Sessions up on this screen
spin
right
zone.
now, please. When it comes to I'm dying up here, this is so funny to move on.
Hard left, dude. Go for it. Just crank that wheel back in, baby.
I don't think I have it in me, to be honest with you, Chip.
This isn't live, right? We'll cut all that, right? This isn't currently on the internet.
You know, you were in Obvious Child. You were on Girls too. A fairly progressive movie and a progressive show for the most part. And do you feel it necessary as an artist to be a part of progressive work? Would you ever be in a work by a conservative filmmaker?
Oh man. You know, it's interesting. Like that kind of cuts both ways in my own very subjective sense of my place in the world, which is that.
Mel Gibson wants you to be in his next movie.
That's an interesting, like... To me, in that case, it depends on the script, right? Like, if the script is leaning in a direction that I have no interest in being a part of, then yeah, I would walk away from that. Like, I'm doing okay, and the money's not worth participating in a thing that I think is not something needed in this world. If it, maligns and sidelines people who don't deserve to be, or pushes an agenda that I find to be abhorrent, then no, I probably wouldn't be a part of it. People attached are allowed to have their own irrational, insane viewpoints, and that's probably not going to stop me from working on something. And my my participation in projects that are perceived to be or are like thoughtful and progressive, I'd love to take a lot of credit for being a part of that. But really, in most of those cases, in all of those cases, while I agree with the creators' intent and point of view, and most often their personal point of view as well, I'm just a guy who gets hired at the end after they've done all this creative work, and I get tacked on and then am part of what seems to be art that moves, hopefully, a discussion forward, or at least is engaged in some discussion. But to say that I am an integral part of that, other than being an actor, is a lie on my part. And do I feel it's like a responsibility? I think it's, I would say it's like a citizen's responsibility to be thoughtful and well-informed and engaged. And you can make whatever like opinion you want at the end of the day based off of reading true news sources. And of course we live in a world where like that is apparently up for debate. But it's certainly not my duty as an actor, I don't think, to have a personal agenda that drives the work I choose. But as a human being, I certainly am. And it's a very weird gray area when actors or directors like take the sort of public moment that they have, as I just did, to address an issue. You know what I mean?
As long as it's for a progressive issue, not a conservative one, we're fine here.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It is weird. It is weird to be like, I sit at home and be like, these people should shut up. I don't need, even when I agree, I'm like, shut up, stop grandstanding, I don't care. And now I have a microphone in my hand and I took 5 minutes to talk about affirmative action. Like,
well, we live in an, I don't want to say we live in an age, just like a cliche phrase. And I guess it is fairly hypocritical, but it's also almost impossible to talk about anything but politics right now and what's happening in this country. I mean, what's happening in this country is historically insane. We've never seen it before. History professors are like, we're sliding into a dictatorship and it's an autocracy and inequalities at incredible highs, and there's a heroin epidemic. And so it's almost impossible right now to not talk about what I heard on the news this morning, what I'm gonna hear on the news in 5 minutes, what I'm gonna see on Twitter as soon as I get off this. One, because the administration is so bad at PR as well.
It is remarkable. I just can't. I like to, this isn't like a new thought, but man, the tweets that like come out that are clearly one person writing and then clearly another, it's like shocking. That you can feel his staff being like, just give me the phone and let me write the apology tweet.
Right.
And it's very thoughtful and concise and this and that. And the next one is like, yeah, right, sad. You're like, well, I think I know who wrote that one. I think I know who had the phone in their hand.
Time to tweet.
Like, I don't know. And it's also scarier, maybe not scarier. It's just like, if that version of the White House goes silent, it will concern me more because that version of the White House still exists. They've just found a way to keep it quiet so that we are presented with like, hey guys, nothing to see here. It's all going well. But meanwhile, behind closed doors, the person with their finger on the button is doing this, waiting to hit it. Like,
because he doesn't have the phone in his hand to hit
yes, like 2 phones and it's just elbow trying to find the button for the nuclear. Like,
that's why they're letting him tweet. It's keeping him away from the nuclear button, right? Like,
just give him the phone. Just give him the phone. Whatever.
With the phone. Come on, get him away from the button.
We have a 2-hour maximum on the tablets.
Yeah, just give him the phone. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions about the show?
Guys, do you have questions?
Yeah.
Anybody have a save me from myself?
Right here.
Hey, first of all, thank you for such an honest, thoughtful, provoking, and
You got it.
it's refreshing and
Cool.
validating to see people that you admire and care about the world and actual adulting and things that matter. So
Adulting.
Thanks, man.
adulting, you know, something we don't have a ton of right now. So my question, you've been blowing up. Movies, television, like obviously you've been working for a long time, but you're really blowing up in the mainstream entertainment side of things. So I was wondering how your life has changed in the last year.
That's really lovely. That's a very, just a thoughtful question. That's nice, you know? My life has, the real honest answer is my life has changed that, like, I'm on the road all the time, and it's a bummer, you know? Like, I lived in New York for a long time, just moved to LA. As soon as I got to LA, I got a job back in New York. So I've been here for a month, and my wife's been back there, and I've probably been, like, home. We've probably been in the same state, like, 3 months out of the last year, you know? Which is, like, the dream in a big way to be like, just keep working, and I get to work with fantastic people, for the most part, on projects that I, for one reason or another, love being in, and meet cool people and see the world or the country, and also, like, that's what you dream of as a kid when you want to do this thing, is to be like, I just want to act all the time, and then getting that opportunity is incredible. And the hard thing is, like, the toll that probably takes on, like, your family, the people who want to spend time with you and that you want to be with. And when I was younger, I didn't really understand why an actor would outright choose to do, like, half-hour network sitcom if they had other options outside of, like, that pays extremely well. But part of it is that you have, like, 8 months out of the year where you're in Los Angeles and you're there with your family. You get to go home and see your kids at the end of the day, and, like, that's huge. And at 24, I didn't really think of that, you know? I just was happy to try to get money and, like, work. So on a personal note, that's really how my life has changed. And work-wise, I'd say, for a long time, I felt like I just didn't belong. You know what I mean? I had, like, the like, imposter syndrome, where even after you've gotten the job, you show up on set and be like, I'm a fucking hack and everybody knows it and they shouldn't have cast me. I can't recreate the magic from the day I auditioned. And it would, like, hem me in. My own garbage would hem me in a way that I felt like, if I've ever watched that stuff again, I'm like, man, you could have done a lot more with that if you'd owned your own space and felt like you have a right to be here and to do these things and to have an idea, and people can say no, but, like, you have a right to do that stuff. And
Did you feel that way when I mean, it's a great performance in the film, but I'm wondering if you felt that way on Carol, just because of the level of talent that was involved in that film.
I absolutely feel that way. Yeah. I did then, and I certainly do now. I look back and think, like, you blew it.
I think you give a wonderful performance in that film.
I really appreciate it. I mean, that's very kind. And I don't...
one of the best films to come out in the last decade. It's a beautiful movie.
I'm beyond honored to be a part of that movie. And, you know, I was in a meeting one time, and the person I was speaking with started, like... it was like a person of power, you know what I mean? Like, I was for sure the underling in this interaction. And they kind of started, like, bad-mouthing Todd Haynes just about his artistry and this and that, and I was like, knew that I was blowing an opportunity with this person, and had to be like, that's probably one of the only two people that, like, I'm just not going to sit here and listen to this, so, like, pick something else to talk about. That's absurd to have this discussion with you. And it was weird, and I definitely didn't get any jobs from that company, but still feel like right in the world that is what happened, because he, as a person and an artist, is, like, of the highest order. I would help that guy move out of his house. You know what I mean? Like, just, I think he's the best. And I, of course, am thrilled to have been in it and to be in that and to work with that cast. But I also look at those performances and I'm like, oh man, if only, and not in a way that's like you're terrible and just obsess over my own perception of myself, but to truly be like, there's more you could have done. Like, I'm now sort of obsessive about work, where at the time I was into working, and part of that unwillingness to be a full obsessive was because I didn't think I belonged. And so that change is being like, dude, you belong. Like, they hired you for a reason. You totally belong here. You have every right to come up with ideas and share things and this and that. And they may shoot it down and you may have a terrible time and people think this and whatever, but like, I work now so much harder than I ever did before, because I also see like, oh man, you see when that little opportunity hits and you're like, I'm gonna grab this thing. Like, I'm gonna, this doesn't happen. You know what I mean? Like, 99% of actors are not working. So anytime I get this little moment, I'm like, dude, fuck, just give me that thing. Like, let me do everything I can with it. Because it can all like go away. You might never get to act again. It might, for whatever reason, like that might be it. So that's a big change just professionally, where I'm like all in. Personally, professionally, all in. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Want to get another question? Who? Oh,
Hey, Jake.
hi.
What's up?
How you doing?
Good.
So with Carol being set in the 1950s and then this show being set in the 70s, what is it like working in a different period, and are there any challenges or any differences than just in the contemporary time?
You know, yes and no, right? So to me, like the mainstay, like no matter what period or era, the most important thing would be who is this person and what do they want and what are these relationships, and you know, like trying to understand the pain in their life that has formed them into who they are, for better or worse. And so that sort of transcends time, in my opinion. Clothes and hair do a lot to get you from one believable era into the next that, you know, I can't take credit for, obviously, or that I get to sort of throw in my opinion as to, like with this, Christy, who's the wonderful, wonderful costume designer, wardrobe head, I came in and I was like, hey man, I kind of feel like Clapton, Levon Helm, like for this vibe, and the lookbook, the boards that she had put together was all David Gilmour and Robbie Robertson. So it was like as meshed together as it could get, and it's amazing to like have that vibe. And with Carol, Sandy Powell is an absolutely incredible designer, and her concept for that world is also like beyond my pay grade and creative ability. So I just was like, yeah, whatever you think looks good. And then stylistically, there's of course like, who is your person in this era? For Carol, Richard was a guy who his dream was like a 2-bedroom in Hoboken, and he'd be the manager of that department store and have a car in the driveway. That was like the dream. And in his mind, the reason that didn't work out is because his dream was too small. Like, she just, heterosexual, homosexual, anything, she just had literally a larger dream than his life could handle. And so that's sort of his place in that era of the 50s and what was sort of expected or hoped for. And then Nick, at least in his own mind, is trying to break through something, trying to like find the next level, the next layer of truth, and is still pushing ahead, even if like the experiments are not going the way he wants them to, you know, or the means to that end are failing along the way. And that again is sort of looking at the history of this the sort of rock and roll revolution that came in the 60s didn't happen for entertainment and stand-up in particular until the 70s. And so he is sort of, in my mind at least, a birth of that in the early 70s of trying to, it's not alt comedy as we know it now, but those guys of that era who were basically the Jimi Hendrix of comedy, in which they completely changed the way that we think of live entertainment, was like
Which is why the film the show, starts at this period of time in the 70s, right? Because what we're seeing with a lot of these comics is them sort of building comedy around their own original voice. Like what we saw, I actually can't say this because I would give it away, but the stand-ups that go on the Tonight Show, what we see them doing is fairly basic set up punchline bits on the Tonight Show, but in the club experimenting with finding their voice. Like your character we're seeing after getting sober is now re-experimenting with finding his voice. We're seeing Ari Grainer's character experimenting with finding her voice as well.
Yeah, there's a sort of new model at this juncture coming about where you could talk about your history, your problems, your darkness in a way that previously was not just allowed in a way or current or thought of as entertainment.
RJ's character as well is doing that, and he's butting up against an older generation of a black comic who just doesn't see that as a possibility at all.
And there's also Lenny Bruce, like 20 years prior to this, is really the first guy to deal with social mores in a way that got him silenced by the courts, and he could not do his act anymore, So in a real way, there is like a danger for Lenny's generation of speaking like this publicly. And in the 70s, there's also like a drug culture that is out in the open, that's no longer this sort of like hidden behind closed doors, but as that generation becomes older and is the active generation in the world, they want to go to a club and see a guy talk about taking acid and make jokes about trips and cocaine and this and that, and that sort of freedom to talk, I mean, like you said, still in like this lightly misogynistic way, talk about sex or relationships, is a new frontier for them. And the show walks this line, and hopefully successfully, of doing material that to a modern audience is a little stale at times. You're like, we know, like I've heard that. This isn't that edgy. But for 1973, it's like mind-blowing,
The show also does a really fantastic job of building the stories out around the stand-up sets, so that by the time you're actually watching a stand-up set, it's almost the material within the set itself is immaterial to everything else that you've been watching within the show. So it doesn't have to be funny. The information is that the audience is laughing at him, so you get that this person is succeeding, or they're not laughing, or that they're failing, or the comics are watching, so they're doing something personal and interesting. But the show itself doesn't live or die based off of the success of the character's stand-up routines.
Yeah, it's not just a half-hour open mic of stand-ups in the 70s, and you have to hope that they're funny, and if not, like, it's all over. And really, I think, it's a show about stand-ups, but the part, to me, as an actor and then seeing my peers work, because I'm not there for 2/3 of what gets shot, is that like interpersonal, bless you, is that, can we get a tight on the sneeze? Is there, is just like the friendships, the relationships, the status shifts, the success, like that to me is the part that really I hope people lock into. And, if we continue on, I think the show will continue to explore even more.
I think we have time for one more question. You have a microphone.
Hi.
Success. Hello.
I was just wondering, with this show, was it a challenge for you developing the character? Did you have to draw from any legendary comics for the character?
Well, to some extent, I would say, so just a background, our show is based on a book by William Nolstetter, who is the original LA Times entertainment beat reporter for the stand-up world in the 70s, when nobody else was covering stand-up comedy, and the Times was like, I get, apparently it's popular, some kid should cover this. So he was friends with Kaufman and all these cats, because it was in the 20s. So the book that the show is based on is dealing with these actual artists and stand-ups. We are then sort of an amalgamation of some of those people or personalities or stories of those people mashed into a completely new characters. So for me, you know, spanning generations, there's a mix of Lenny Bruce, Bill Hicks, even Mitch Hedberg 20 years past this, as far as lifestyle choices, personality traits, style of stand-up, what they hope to accomplish in the world, what success they found or didn't find, friendships lost, built, you know, things like that, that we're sort of drawing from people's lives or stories within the comedy world and then putting into the context of 1973. So a story from 1994 may wind up in here, but with the lens shifted so that it fits into this world as we've built it. And a huge amount of credit goes to Mike Aguilar and Dave Flabat, who are EPs on the show and are just like in the trenches with us every day and are defining these characters for us and working extremely collaboratively along with the cast when any of us are saying, I know that you want this thing to happen, but it feels like it's such a quick move to get there. You know, like they will help sort this out so that you feel like you have ownership or I have ownership over this role, and they do too. So a huge amount of credit, you know, goes to their defining the terms of these people, and then